She was a billionaire heiress, beautiful, bold, and expected to marry for power, not love. But when her parents tried to force her into a cold business deal, she did the unthinkable. She paid a homeless beggar to pretend to be her fiancé. What she didn't know. He was hiding a secret bigger than her entire fortune, and by the time the truth came out, she wouldn't just question her family. She'd question everything she thought she knew about love, wealth, and herself. Would you risk your legacy for love? Sit back and watch how this shocking story unfolds, because nothing is as it seems. The soft jazz music played gently in the background as waiters moved from table to table inside the beautiful rooftop restaurant in Victoria Island. Everything sparkled. Glass walls, chandeliers, polished silverware. It was the kind of place where the rich went to show they were richer. Diana sat at a corner table near the glass window, watching the night lights of the city. She wore a simple off-shoulder black dress, minimal makeup, and her natural hair was packed neatly. She looked like elegance, but her face showed she wasn't enjoying the evening. Across from her sat Richard, her fiancé. He adjusted his designer cufflinks and scrolled through his phone with one hand, barely looking up. A young waiter walked up and set down Richard's meal carefully in front of him. Richard didn't even say thank you. He looked down at the plate, sneered, and said loudly, "Can you believe this place?" Diana glanced up, already sensing what was coming. Richard pushed the plate slightly away. "Honestly, this is embarrassing. I swear I hope I can get this entire place shut down." The waiter, confused and embarrassed, stood quietly. Richard waved him off. "Go, just go." The waiter left. Diana leaned forward slightly. "Are you okay?" Richard scoffed. "No, he's a sleazy jerk, and he smells like fish or something." Diana blinked. "Richard," he snapped. "What? Don't tell me you're defending these waiters again, please. Their job is to serve. They should at least do it with respect." "Respect works both ways," Diana said calmly. Richard shook his head. "You know what? I don't care how much money they make. You can't buy class. That's the problem with these people. Born poor, live poor, die poor. It's in their blood." Diana froze, her hands clenched under the table. He went on, still laughing lightly to himself. "People like that waiter? That's why they and their entire generation will never make it out of poverty. Ungrateful peasants." Diana sat back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slowly. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did I just hear you call them peasants?" Richard looked her dead in the eye. "Well, what else would you call them? These people think being polite is optional. Honestly, if I had another drink, I'd throw it right in his face." Diana slowly reached for her glass. Richard didn't see it coming. With one clean motion, she threw the wine straight in his face. It splashed across his cheeks and dripped onto his expensive white shirt. The entire restaurant gasped. Conversation stopped. Phones came up, heads turned. Richard was frozen, stunned. "Diana, what the hell?" She stood up, calmly, controlled. "You treat people like garbage just because you have money. You insult people who are working hard to earn a living. You call them names and then expect me to sit here and smile like it's okay?" She picked up her purse. "I'm not sorry, Richard. In fact, if I had another drink, I'd throw that one in your face too." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Richard sat there, face wet, fuming and completely humiliated. The waiter, from a distance, tried not to smile. Diana walked out into the Lagos night. The breeze hit her face, and for the first time in a long time, she could breathe. That evening, Diana stood quietly in the living room of her parents' mansion. The place was grand, white tiles, gold wall frames, big curtains, but the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Her mother stood by the glass table, arms folded tightly. Her father, Mr. Thompson, sat on the edge of the leather couch, phone in his hand, frowning deeply. The silence was thick. Finally, her mother spoke. Richard called. Diana said nothing. "He told us what you did," her mother continued, voice shaking with anger. "You threw a drink in his face, in public?" Diana looked her in the eyes. Yes, I did. Are you out of your mind? Her mother snapped. Do you know who that man is? Do you know what this means for us? For the family? He insulted the waiter, Mum, Diana said quietly. He called them peasants, said their whole generation would stay poor. I wasn't going to sit there and pretend that's okay. Her father stood up slowly. Diana, this is not just about your feelings. This is bigger than that. Do you realize what you've done? I stood up for people who deserve respect, she replied, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Thompson's voice rose. Richard just inherited his father's company. He's one of the wealthiest bachelors in this country. Marrying him would secure our family's future. This was our chance to merge with his family business. Do you know how long I've worked for this? Diana shook her head. So that's it? That's all I am to you? A key to a business deal? Her mother stepped forward. Sweetheart, please. You're being emotional. We're trying to secure our name, our legacy. We just want what's best for you. Diana's eyes filled with quiet pain. No, you want what's best for you. You care about money, about image. What about what I want? What about me? Her father's voice turned cold. You've never had to live without money, Diana. That's why you think you don't need it. You're spoiled. Diana looked away, then turned back. So because I've always had money, I'm not allowed to want something real? I should just marry someone who treats people like dirt because it's good for business. Her mother tried to touch her arm. Please, Diana, just apologize to him. Fix this. If you do, we can forget all this ever happened. Her father added, if you don't, then maybe you should find a different roof to live under. Silence. Diana took a deep breath. Fine. She walked to the hallway, grabbed her small black handbag from the shelf, and turned back. I guess I'll be staying somewhere else tonight. Then she walked out, closing the door gently behind her. Her parents didn't follow. They just stood there, staring at the space where their daughter used to be. It was late. The street was quiet except for the soft hum of passing cars and the hiss of smoke rising from a roadside food joint. Diana sat alone on a wooden bench beside a local food vendor near the market. Her designer purse rested at her feet. Her hair was tied back. She looked like every other tired woman just trying to think. She hadn't eaten all day, but food was the last thing on her mind. Everything felt heavy. Her parents' words, Richard's arrogant behavior, the way people stared when she walked out of that restaurant. She held her chin in her palm, eyes distant. Just then, something caught her attention. Across the street by a gutter edge, she saw a man. He looked rough, shirt torn at the shoulder, slippers worn out, hair uncombed. He sat near a sack of plastic bottles and had a small loaf of bread in his hand. But what Diana noticed wasn't his clothes. It was what he did next. An older woman, thin and barefoot, walked past him slowly. She stopped and sat near the edge of the gutter, coughing. The man looked at her, tore his bread in half, then slowly stood up and walked over. He knelt beside her. Ma, take this and eat, he said softly, handing her one half of the bread. The woman looked up, eyes wide. God bless you, my son. The man smiled, nodded, and went back to his spot. He sat quietly and chewed the other half, slow, humble, peaceful. Diana stared. So many rich men she knew wouldn't give a kobo to anyone. Yet here was this man, who looked like he had nothing, giving away his last meal. She stood up, crossed the road slowly, and walked toward him. The man saw her coming but didn't move. He just looked up, calm. Hi, she said gently. Sorry, I just saw what you did. He nodded. Okay, that was kind of you. He shrugged lightly. She looked hungry. Diana smiled. You gave her your food. You didn't have much and you still shared it. The man looked at her, eyes clear but tired. Sometimes we don't need to have plenty before we help someone. She stared at him a moment longer, then sat beside him on the pavement. I'm Diana, she said, offering her hand. He looked at it, then shook it gently. His hands were rough but steady. Henry, he replied. Diana and Henry sat side by side on the pavement, the night breeze brushing gently against them. The sounds of frying oil and quiet conversations filled the air around the small roadside food joint. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Diana looked at Henry again. He was calm, still chewing slowly on the little piece of bread he had left. He didn't talk much, but something about him felt different, honest, grounded. "I know we've just met, but you're not like most people I know," she finally said. Henry smiled a little. "That's because I'm not trying to be like anybody else." She chuckled quietly. "You're not scared to be kind, even when you have nothing." He looked at her. "Having nothing doesn't mean you stop being human." Diana blinked. That hit deep. She looked away, thinking. Father's words, Richard's insults, the pressure, the judgment, they all came back to her in a wave. Then suddenly, an idea formed in her head. It sounded crazy, but also perfect. She turned back to Henry slowly. "Henry, can I ask you something? Unusual?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She took a breath. "I need your help. Just for one night." He stared at her, quiet. "I want you to pretend to be my boyfriend," she said. "A wealthy investor, smart, clean, sharp. Just long enough to meet my parents and prove a point." Henry looked confused. "Pretend?" Diana nodded. "My father thinks money is everything. He thinks I need to marry someone rich to keep our family legacy. I want to show him that character matters more than cash." Henry kept looking at her. "I'll pay you," she added. 1 million naira, just to come with me, play the role, and after that, you go back to your life." Henry chuckled under his breath and shook his head gently. "No." Diana blinked. "What? Why not?" Henry smiled kindly. "You seem like a good person. But I'm not a puppet. I don't wear suits and pretend to be who I'm not, especially for money." Just then, 2 men approached from behind. One had dreadlocks tucked under a scarf. The other was lean with a faded t-shirt and a small bag over his shoulder. "Henry," one of them called out. "You were here?" Henry stood up slightly. "Diana, meet my brothers. This is David, and that one is Daniel." They both waved politely. "What is happening there?" David asked. "She wants me to act as her rich boyfriend," Henry said casually. David's eyes lit up. "Wow, act rich. And is she going to pay you? Did you say yes?" Henry shook his head. "I said no." "Why not?" Daniel jumped in. 1 million naira. Do you know what we can do with that money? Wait, have you ever seen that kind of money in your life before?" Henry sighed. "It's not just about the money." David stepped closer. "Bro, be real. We sleep under the bridge. You gave your last bread away today. That money can change everything for you. It can take you off the streets." Diana stood quietly watching. Henry looked at both of them, then looked back at her. After a long pause, he said, 2 million. Diana blinked. "What?" He smiled faintly. 2 million naira, but not for me. I'll split it between David and Daniel. We all eat together, we all rise together. Diana paused, then nodded slowly. "Deal." Henry stretched out his hand. They shook on it. The next morning came with soft light and a quiet breeze. Diana stood outside a clean barber shop in a quiet part of the city, watching people pass. Her thoughts were heavy, but her face was calm. Inside, Henry sat in the barber's chair. The sound of clippers buzzed low. His head was tilted back, eyes closed. His overgrown hair was being cut low and neat. His beard, once rough and wild, was shaped carefully into clean lines. Diana peeked through the glass and watched quietly. She still didn't understand him. Most people would have grabbed that money and run. But Henry didn't. He had every reason to say yes. Yet he hesitated, then agreed, but only so he could share it with others. What kind of man gives away his last meal, then turns down 1 million naira, and only says yes so his friends could have a better life? It made her curious, not just about his story, but about his heart. When Henry finally stepped out of the shop, the difference was clear. Diana blinked. His hair was low and even, his beard trimmed perfectly. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and new black trousers. He held a simple paper bag with the new suit and shoes inside. She said nothing at first. Henry raised one brow, a little unsure. Is it too much? Diana gave a soft smile, clearly impressed. No, you look really good. Later that afternoon, they sat in the living room of a serviced apartment, surrounded by open books, a notepad, and her tablet screen. She walked him through real estate basics, just enough to make him sound believable. If anyone asks, she said, you're a property investor who just moved from Abuja to expand your business in Lagos. Henry nodded slowly, listening. You don't need to say too much, she added. Speak calmly, be confident. Say things like, I focus on commercial spaces in the island, or we're currently expanding our portfolio. That kind of thing. Henry practiced it a few times. He wasn't perfect, but he was focused, sharp, calm. When he finally tried on the full suit, dark navy, fitted perfectly polished shoes, Diana stood still. She didn't say anything at first. Henry looked in the mirror, then turned to her. Well? He asked quietly. Diana stared for a moment. You don't just look like someone else, she said. You look like someone who belongs in any room. He smiled gently, buttoned the jacket, and adjusted the sleeves. She watched him from across the room, her heart a little quieter now, but her mind louder than ever. Who was this man? And why did it feel like the more she dressed him up, the more she wanted to know what was underneath? 3 days later, the Thompsons' family mansion was glowing that night. The garden had been transformed into a cocktail dinner scene. Soft jazz played in the background, fairy lights hung across tall palm trees, and uniformed staff carried trays of wine and canapes. It was a gathering of Lagos's elite. Businessmen, politicians, family friends. Everyone wore their best. Inside the crowd, Richard stood near the bar, sipping slowly from a glass of champagne. He wore a sharp black tuxedo and a smug look, chatting with 2 older men who kept laughing at all his jokes. He looked relaxed on the outside, but his eyes never stopped scanning the room. Then came a ripple. People began turning toward the main entrance. Whispers spread. And then she appeared. Diana, wearing a deep emerald gown that hugged her gracefully, walked in confidently, her head held high, her steps slow and certain. But it wasn't just her entrance that made the room stop. It was the man beside her. His hair neatly trimmed, suit perfectly fitted, calm expression. He didn't smile too wide, didn't look nervous. He looked like he belonged. Gasps filled the room. Some leaned in to whisper, others just stared. Richard turned sharply, the smile on his face fading. Mr. Thompson, standing near the balcony with a glass in hand, narrowed his eyes. His wife leaned closer. Is that Diana's date? Diana approached them, holding Henry's arm gently. Daddy, Mum, I'd like you to meet someone. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. This is Henry Adams, she said with a soft smile. He's a property investor based in Abuja. He's expanding his business here in Lagos. Henry extended his hand. It's an honor, sir. Mr. Thompson shook it, watching him closely. Investor, you say? Yes, Henry said calmly. Mostly commercial real estate, offices, shared spaces. We just completed a multi-unit deal in Maitama, looking to develop something similar here in Victoria Island. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. Interesting. What are your thoughts on the impact of the new real estate tax policy? Henry didn't blink. It'll force bloated portfolios to shrink. Smart investors will go lean. Focus on long-term tenants. Quality over quantity. Mr. Thompson actually smiled. That's exactly what I said last week. Across the room, a small group of men had gathered around. They listened as Henry spoke about market trends, foreign interest in African commercial property, and land value projections. He didn't use fancy words, he just spoke clearly and confidently, like someone who knew the game. Diana stood beside him, saying little, just watching. Her father pulled her aside at one point. Where did you meet him? Diana shrugged lightly. I wasn't looking, it just happened. Mr. Thompson looked across the garden at Henry, now deep in conversation with the chairman of a popular finance group. He's sharp. Meanwhile, Richard stood in the corner, eyes narrowed. He watched the way Henry moved, how people leaned in to hear him talk, how Diana laughed quietly at something he said. He gripped his glass tighter. "What's going on with you?" a woman asked beside him. Richard didn't answer. All he could think was, how did Diana move on from him so quickly? And who exactly was this Henry Adams? The night carried on with laughter, soft music, and the clinking of glasses. Gentle wind passed through the trees, and conversation filled the Thompson garden. But Diana was no longer focused on the lights or the people. She was watching Henry. Not because she needed to keep up the act, but because she was genuinely curious. He moved through the room like he belonged, even though deep down she knew he had only worn a suit like that for the first time yesterday. Yet there he was, calm, collected, respectful, but never trying too hard. She noticed how he listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people listened. Near the buffet table, a small group of men had gotten into a heated argument over a recent political scandal. Voices were raised. One man even slammed his glass on the table. Henry walked past, then paused. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, voice gentle, "but don't you think this sounds more like frustration than real disagreement?" They turned to him, surprised. "Everyone here wants the same thing, better leadership. Maybe if we spoke with less anger and more solutions, we'd actually find common ground." The group went silent. Then one of them nodded slowly. "That's fair." Henry smiled. "Apologies. I just didn't want you all to lose your voices before dessert." They laughed, tension broken. Diana stood not far away, quietly watching. She felt something shift inside her. He wasn't just acting, he was thoughtful, measured, kind. He made people feel seen without needing to be the center of attention. Later, near the patio, Mr. Thompson leaned in close to his wife. "There's something about that young man," he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "You like him?" Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "He reminds me of myself at that age. Quiet, focused. Knows how to read a room. He doesn't chase attention. It just follows him." His wife smiled softly. "Maybe Diana actually knows what she's doing." Meanwhile, not everyone was impressed. Richard, standing near a tall potted plant with a glass in hand, had been watching everything. He hadn't spoken to Diana since she walked in, but he hadn't stopped watching her either. He had noticed the way she looked at Henry, not just politely, but with real interest, and it burned. He stepped aside and took out his phone. "Yeah," he whispered into it. "I need you to look someone up for me. Henry Adams. Abuja-based real estate investor. I want full details, background, business records, everything." His eyes didn't leave Henry as he ended the call. If this Henry was really who he claimed to be, Richard would find out. And if he wasn't, he'd make sure everyone else found out too. The following morning, the sun filtered through pale clouds as cars moved slowly through the busy streets of the city. The scent of roadside roasted plantain filled the air, mixed with car horns and morning voices. Inside Diana's car, the silence was calm, not awkward. She sat behind the wheel, dressed in a plain blouse and jeans. No makeup, no heels. Just her natural self. Henry sat beside her, still neatly dressed in a white shirt and black trousers. The suit was gone, but the quiet confidence remained. "Thanks for coming with me," Diana said as she pulled into the compound of Hope Children's Hospital. "No problem," Henry replied. "I wasn't doing anything anyway." They got down and walked in. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and fresh paint. Walls were light blue. Nurses moved gently from room to room. Diana greeted the receptionist and led Henry down the hall. She waved at a few children, smiled at a nurse, and opened the door to a small ward. Inside were 6 beds. In one of them, a little girl sat up holding a teddy bear. Her head was bald, her eyes tired. But when she saw Diana, her whole face lit up. "Auntie Diana," she shouted with a soft giggle. Diana walked over and hugged her tightly. "Blessing, my baby. You're looking stronger today." "I am. I even finished my pap this morning." Diana laughed. "That's my girl. I brought someone with me." Blessing turned to Henry. "Is he your boyfriend?" Henry stepped closer, unsure. Diana smiled. "His name is Henry. He's my friend." Blessing looked at him carefully, then held out her teddy. "Do you want to hold her?" Henry smiled and nodded. "Sure." He sat beside her bed. "What's her name?" "Princess Dr. Kendra," Blessing said proudly. Henry grinned. "That's a strong name." Diana stood back, watching as they talked. "Do you want to be a doctor too?" Henry asked. Blessing shook her head. "No, I want to be an ice cream seller." He laughed. "That's even better." Just then, a nurse walked in. "Blessing, it's time for your test." The girl nodded quietly and handed her teddy back to Henry. "You'll wait for me?" Henry looked into her eyes and said softly, "We'll be right here." As Blessing was wheeled out, Henry leaned back and looked down. Diana sat beside him. "You're really good with her," she said gently. Henry stayed quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "I lost my best friend when I was young," he said. "She was very sick, and her family couldn't afford the treatment." Diana turned to him. "I remember sitting beside her bed thinking, if I just had money, maybe she would have lived." He paused. "But I was just a kid. I couldn't do anything." Diana's eyes softened. "I guess," Henry continued, "now I try to honor her memory. Every time I make a child like Blessing smile, it feels like I'm doing something right." Diana's heart ached. This man, who had nothing, carried so much. She had seen him cleaned up, dressed up, speaking like a businessman. But here, in this ward, with no crowd, no stage, no money, she saw who he truly was. And it moved her. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just sat quietly beside him. And for the first time since this all began, she wasn't thinking about the plan, or the money, or her father. She was thinking about Henry, the man who had nothing, yet somehow still gave so much. Somewhere across town, in a quiet private office, Richard sat in front of his laptop, eyes locked on the screen. The private investigator's voice played clearly over speakerphone. "There's no record of any Henry Adams connected to real estate in Abuja. No CAC registration, no ID, no passport, no tax files, nothing." Richard leaned back in his chair, frowning. "So, who is he?" he asked. "We don't know," the voice replied. "Whoever he is, he's not who he claims to be." Richard's lips curled slightly. "Good," he said. "Send me everything you found. I'll take it from here." He closed the laptop slowly and stared out the window. The charity fundraiser was in 2 days. That's when the truth would come out. Across the city, the evening sun was fading as Diana and Henry walked side by side down a quiet street near her flat. She held a small bag of groceries in one hand, and he carried the other. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them was warm, not awkward. As they reached her gate, Diana paused. She turned to him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Henry nodded. "I know there is more to you, like your story, and how you ended up on the street as a homeless man." Henry stayed still, but his face softened. "You're careful," she continued, "and private, and I get that." She looked at him, eyes gentle. "But I just want you to know, I see you." He blinked. "You're kind, you're thoughtful, and you have more heart than anyone I've ever met. I don't care where you're from. I know you'll tell me when you're ready." Henry didn't say anything at first. But then, slowly, a warm smile spread across his face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means a lot." Diana stepped a little closer. They stood there, right by the gate, with the last golden light of day falling over them. For a long moment they just looked at each other. No masks, no pretending. Just two people, seeing each other clearly. The day of the charity fundraiser came quickly. The ballroom of Royal Crest Towers sparkled with gold lighting and crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved between guests in black and white uniforms, offering wine and hors d'oeuvres. Tonight was the charity fundraiser for children's hospitals. Everyone who was anyone in the city's business circles was there. Top CEOs, press photographers, socialites, and even a few senators. Journalists whispered names into phones, TV crews rolled their cameras. Diana stood near the entrance in a soft gold gown. Her hair was tied up, her face calm, but inside her heart beat fast. Beside her was Henry, dressed once again in that fitted navy suit. His eyes scanned the room with quiet ease, but tonight he looked a little distant. "You okay?" Diana asked under her breath. Henry nodded, just taking it all in. The crowd turned as Mr. Thompson walked up to the stage with a confident smile. He tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you for joining us to support a cause close to our hearts, children's health care." Polite applause followed. He continued, "But beyond charity, tonight is also a celebration of legacy, a new chapter. And I'm proud to announce that our company is in talks to merge with one of the fastest growing real estate firms in the region, Adams Properties, led by Mr. Henry Adams." More applause. Guests turned to look at Henry with admiration. Henry gave a small nod from where he stood. He didn't move. He didn't smile too much. He just stood tall, hands gently folded in front of him. But just then, a voice cut through the room like a knife. "This man is a fraud." Everyone turned. Richard stood near the front row, holding a microphone. His suit was perfect. His face was full of confidence and anger. "He's not even Henry Adams," Richard said louder. "I did my research. There's no business record, no history, no background. This man isn't who he says he is." The room went silent. Cameras turned. Whispers rushed across the hall like waves. Diana's breath caught in her throat. Mr. Thompson stepped away from the mic, staring at Henry in confusion. All eyes were on him now. Henry didn't speak. He just slowly stepped forward and reached up to remove his glasses. The entire room held its breath. Henry stood under the soft gold light, all eyes fixed on him. Then he looked straight at Richard. "You're right," he said quietly. "My name is not Henry Adams." Gasps spread across the hall like a wave. "My real name is John James. I'm the founder and CEO of Lion Estates." "Isn't that the largest commercial real estate firm in West Africa?" someone muttered from the crowd. Silence. Dead silence. You could hear the clink of a wine glass shaking in someone's hand. John turned to the audience, calm and steady. "I didn't come here to fool anyone. I came to see what people are really like when they think you have nothing." He looked at Richard again. "And it didn't take long to find out who the real fraud is." Richard's smirk faded. "You want to talk about research?" John said. "Let's talk. I had my team pull your company's financial records last week." He pulled out a folded document from his jacket pocket and handed it to a nearby reporter. "Turns out, Richard's business has been bleeding money for over a year. His so-called empire is one signature away from bankruptcy. That's why he clung to Diana, not for love, but for rescue." The crowd gasped again. Several people turned to look at Richard with wide eyes. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. Mr. Thompson stared, stunned. Richard stammered. You don't know what you're talking about." John's voice cut in, sharp but calm. "I considered buying your company out, Richard. But after what I saw tonight, how you speak to people, how you treat them, I'd rather burn my money than save yours." Richard stepped back, red-faced. John turned to Diana, but she was already stepping away. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. "Diana," he called softly, but she didn't stop. She walked quickly out of the ballroom, pushing past the crowd, tears threatening to fall. John didn't wait. He followed her. Outside the grand hall, "Diana," he called again. She turned. "I think I need some air," she said, her voice breaking. The city lights sparkled below like stars trapped beneath glass. Diana stood at the rooftop of the event center, her hands resting lightly on the rail. Her gold dress fluttered gently in the wind. Her heart was still racing, not from anger but from confusion, from everything. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. "Diana," he said softly. She turned slowly. There stood Henry, or rather John James Smith. No more pretending, no glasses, no made-up backstory, just a man, looking her in the eye with quiet truth. "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't speak. He took a breath. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "My real name isn't Henry. That was a cover. My full name is John James Smith, founder and CEO of Lion Estates. We own over 300 buildings across West Africa." Diana's eyes widened slightly. Her breath caught, but she didn't move. "I didn't lie to hurt you," he continued. "I did it because, for years, everyone around me only cared about one thing: my money, friends, business partners, even the woman I was engaged to. She said all the right things, acted like she loved me. But a week before our wedding, I found out she was cheating on me, with a man she'd been seeing even before we met." He paused. "Turns out, I was just a walking ATM to her." He looked down for a moment, his voice quiet. "I became bitter, jaded. I hated what my life had become, so I left it all behind. The mansion, the luxury cars, the private staff, everything. I just disappeared." Diana's eyes softened. "I wanted to see if real people still existed," he went on. "People who would treat me like a man, not a wallet. That's how I met David and Daniel. They had nothing, but they still shared everything." He took a slow step closer to her. "And then, I met you." Diana's chest rose slowly with a deep breath. "You didn't care who I was. You didn't ask about my net worth. You treated me like a human being. That's rare, Diana. You're rare." For a moment, neither of them said a word. Then Diana's voice came soft and steady. "I'm not angry," she said, "just overwhelmed." He looked up at her. "I needed to process it. All of it. But I meant everything I said before," she added. "You're good, John. Whether you're poor or rich, you're still good." He didn't say anything. He simply opened his arms, and she walked into them. The hug was slow, quiet, and full of something words couldn't carry. Forgiveness, understanding, maybe even something more. After a long pause, he pulled back just enough to see her face. "Come with me tomorrow," he said gently. "Not as an actor in a plan, but just as you, to see my world, the real one. I want you to know the full truth about me, not just the man I pretended to be." Diana looked into his eyes, then nodded. "I'd like that." And just like that, the wind kept blowing. But the air between them was still. The next day, Diana found herself standing in front of a tall glass building. The name Lion Estates was written in bold silver letters across the entrance. It looked like something out of a movie. Luxurious cars parked outside, marble floors inside, and smartly dressed staff moving through the lobby with quiet urgency. John stood beside her, wearing a clean navy suit, no disguise, no fake name, just himself. "You okay?" he asked gently. Diana nodded, but her fingers gripped her handbag tighter than usual. She was used to luxury, but seeing Henry or John in this setting felt different. He smiled softly. "Come, let me show you." They walked into the elevator. Smooth jazz played as the doors closed. When it opened again, they stepped into a top-floor office that looked like a dream. Wide glass windows showing the ocean, fresh orchids on every desk, shelves filled with design books, and framed photos of buildings across Africa. "This is my world," John said quietly. Diana turned to look at him. He didn't look proud. He looked reflective. He walked slowly to the window, hands in his pockets. "I didn't grow up with this," he said. "I was raised in the ghetto part of the city. One-room apartment. My mom sold tomatoes in the market. My dad repaired radios. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Diana stood beside him, listening closely. When I made my first real money, I lost myself, he continued. Private jets, high-rise apartments, celebrity friends. But no peace. The more I gained, the more I lost inside. He turned to her. Spending just a few weeks on the street reminded me who I am. I met people who had nothing, but would still offer me their last meal. No pressure, no performance, just kindness. Just then there was a knock. The door opened. In walked David, now in a fitted shirt, tucked-in trousers, and a new haircut. Right behind him was Daniel, smiling wide, holding a folder and a tablet. When they saw Diana, both their faces lit up. "Ah, our star girl," David said warmly. "You have no idea how happy we are to see you again." Diana smiled, surprised. "You both look amazing." Daniel laughed. "That's what happens when you stop sleeping under bridges and start signing contracts." They walked up to her, taking turns giving her a friendly hug. David leaned in slightly. "He couldn't stop talking about you, you know. Every time we met it was, 'Diana said this. Diana helped me do that. Diana makes the best fried eggs.'" Daniel added, "It was getting so bad I almost started missing you too." John, standing in the corner with his hands in his pockets, looked away, blushing. Diana laughed softly, looking over at him. He tried to act serious, but the smile on his face gave him away. David turned to her again, more serious now. "You saw something in him when the rest of the world didn't. You believed in him when he was just Henry. We'll never forget that." Diana felt her heart warm. In that moment, surrounded by glass and wealth and glowing city views, this didn't feel like a business empire. It felt like family. Later that night, the sky over the city was calm and quiet. Stars dotted the sky above Victoria Island, and soft waves could be heard crashing gently in the distance. Diana sat quietly in the back of a sleek black car. It had arrived right on time, just like the message from John had promised. "I have something special planned. Please come." She had no idea what to expect, but her heart told her to go. When the car pulled up, she was led to a quiet rooftop garden lit by hundreds of small, warm lights. A single dinner table was set at the center. White tablecloth, candles, fresh flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. It was simple, intimate, beautiful. John stood waiting in a black suit. He smiled as she approached. "You look beautiful," he said. "And you," she smiled, "look like someone with a secret." He chuckled softly. "Maybe." They sat. The food was light, the laughter was easy. They talked about childhood memories, embarrassing moments, and favorite music. For once there was no pressure, no plans, no pretending, just them. After dessert, John leaned back, his voice turning quiet. "Diana," he said, "I know things moved fast. I know this entire journey has been strange. But I also know one thing for sure." He looked directly at her. "I want to be with you. I've never felt so certain about anything in my life." She stared at him, eyes soft. "But more than that," he added, "I want you to be true to yourself. I've seen how much pressure your family puts on you. I've seen how often you shrink to keep everyone happy, and I just want you to know, you don't have to be the perfect heiress." He leaned forward. "You don't have to chase money or mergers or family legacies, not unless you want to. You can choose you, for once." Diana felt her throat tighten. All her life she had been told who to be. But this moment felt different. She nodded slowly, tears touching her lashes. "You're right. I want to choose me now. And I know what I want to do." She took a deep breath. "I want to work full-time with the Children's Hospital. Help kids like Blessing. That's where my heart is." John stood and reached into his pocket. He knelt before her, pulling out a small box. Inside was a real diamond ring, simple, elegant, timeless. "Diana Thompson," he said. "Not as Henry, not as John James Smith, just as me. Will you be mine?" Diana covered her mouth with her hand, tears in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Later that evening, Diana returned home. She stepped into the quiet sitting room of the Thompson residence. Her parents were waiting. "Dad, Mom, I am glad you are both here." Diana stood tall. "I have chosen my path, and I don't want to be some caged heiress living a life I don't like." "What does that mean?" "You are meant to lead the company," Mr. Thompson shouted, "to protect the Thompson empire." "I don't want that," she replied calmly. "That's your dream, not mine." He looked at her in disbelief. She took a step closer. "Dad, I'm choosing my path. I want to help children, not chase deals. I want to be someone who heals people, not someone who only counts profits." Her mother's eyes softened. Her father said nothing. Because for the first time, Diana wasn't asking for permission. She was living her truth. The following morning, Diana walked through the familiar white doors of Hope Children's Hospital. Nurses smiled as she passed. The halls, though modest, felt brighter these days. She was here as more than a volunteer now. She was here as someone who had finally chosen her purpose. As she reached the children's ward, the door burst open, and Blessing came running out laughing. "Auntie Diana!" she cried. Diana knelt just in time to catch her in a warm hug. "I got better," Blessing giggled. "The doctor said I can go home next week." Diana's eyes filled with happy tears. "Are you serious?" The little girl nodded proudly. "They said somebody paid for my surgery. Everything." Diana paused. Her smile faded into thought. "Do you know who?" Blessing shook her head. "No. They said it was anonymous." Later that evening, Diana sat beside John on a quiet bench outside the hospital garden. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky orange and pink. She looked at him carefully. "You paid for Blessing's surgery, didn't you?" John didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, smiled softly, and said, "She deserved a second chance, the one my friend never had." Diana rested her head on his shoulder. "You're unbelievable." "No," he said, "just a man who finally found something worth living for." A few minutes later, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson arrived. Mr. Thompson walked slowly, his face unusually serious. He looked at the children playing in the garden, then at Blessing, sitting under a tree blowing soap bubbles. Then finally, at his daughter. "Diana," he said, clearing his throat. "I saw her. That little girl. Blessing." Diana nodded, unsure of what was coming. "I saw her smile," he continued, "and I realized you were right." Her eyes softened. "I thought I was protecting you," he said quietly. "I thought money would secure your future. But I forgot what joy looks like. Real joy. What purpose feels like." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward and held Diana's hand. "You made the right choice, sweetheart," she said gently. "We're proud of you." Diana hugged her mother tightly. Her father joined, hesitating only for a second before wrapping his arms around both of them. John stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching the family reunion unfold. Mr. Thompson walked over to him slowly. John nodded respectfully. "You stood by her. You honored her voice, and you reminded me what real success looks like." John offered a soft smile. "Thank you, sir." "And Richard?" Mr. Thompson added with a faint smirk. "Well, turns out his pride cost him everything. His company is gone. The money vanished. Maybe now he'll learn that charm can't cover an empty soul." John said nothing. He didn't need to. Because right now the people who mattered were right here. Diana stepped toward him, took his hand, and rested her head against his chest. In the distance, Blessing's laughter filled the air again. It was the sound of healing, of hope, of a new dawn. Weeks later, the halls of Lion Estate's headquarters looked different. Not because of the shining floors or the new art on the walls, but because of the people. At the top floor boardroom, the long glass table was surrounded by sharp minds, fresh energy, and a new kind of purpose. At the head of the table sat John James Smith, CEO. Beside him, with a tablet and calm smile, sat Diana Thompson, now co-founder of their newest venture, the Lionheart Foundation, dedicated to supporting children's hospitals across West Africa. And on the right side of the room, wearing fitted suits, confident and focused, sat David and Daniel, former street companions, now executives. Daniel flipped through spreadsheets on his screen. Based on the current budget, we can open 2 pediatric wings before the end of the year, David nodded. And we've already partnered with local hospitals in Ibadan and Enugu. Diana smiled proudly. Let's do it. The elevator chimed. Everyone turned as Mr. Thompson stepped in, holding a small gift bag and wearing a grey agbada with quiet elegance. He walked over to John, paused for a moment, then extended his hand. John stood. They shook hands firmly. You've built something remarkable here, Mr. Thompson said. And more importantly, you've built it with heart. John nodded. Thank you, sir. Mr. Thompson turned to his daughter, his voice a little softer. You made the right choice, Diana. She smiled. I know. They walked together toward the grand launch hall downstairs, where cameras flashed and reporters gathered. A large banner behind the stage read, Lionheart Foundation, opening doors for the children who need it most. John stepped to the microphone. He didn't talk about profits. He didn't talk about buildings or business. He talked about hope, about second chances, about finding the right people when you stop looking with your eyes and start listening with your heart. The crowd stood in applause. Later that night, as the sun dipped below the Lagos skyline, Diana and John stood on the balcony, hand in hand. The wind was soft, the future was wide open. Diana's calm, steady voice said, Sometimes you have to lose everything to find everyone who truly matters.